Do you think that you use social media an excessive amount?
Fully. Yeah.
Fully affirmative, yes.
Yeah, I recently even deleted from my phone the Facebook and Twitter apps so I can only use them on my laptop.
Oh,
he's a
well,
desktop writer.
lucky for you. So
Yeah.
today you were unfazed by the Facebook situation.
I was late to the game. I don't even like Facebook. I don't enjoy going on there anymore. Every time I've started doing inventory, and every time I sign on and then to the point when I sign off, I'm like, do I feel better or worse than when I first signed on? And it's always worse.
100%. Today
So
was one of those days where I had spent some time yesterday creating a whole to-do list about how my day, what I was going to spend my time doing at work today. And like an hour of time included social media scheduling. Couldn't do it. So, I have to say I wasn't that bothered by Facebook being down, but I really like watching cat videos and whale videos.
Instagram was harder for me. Yeah.
Instagram's tough. I really like
That's
Instagram.
an app I still have. I have that. I have WhatsApp, although I didn't really miss WhatsApp. I use that maybe
because that's owned by Facebook
twice a week.
What else
Yeah.
is in the Facebook family?
I don't know. All three of them were down though. Elliot, you love socias.
Elliot, you love the socias.
Well, it was funny because a friend of mine is like an exclusive Facebook user, which you don't find very often.
Yeah. Oh,
and
you're friends with an octogenarian. That's nice.
No, I promise you, she's not up that high, but she was frustrated because she felt that Facebook was silencing her views, as an outspoken person. And because she wasn't on the other platforms, she was totally unaware that Facebook was down. So she was railing against Mark Zuckerberg for taking down my posts again. And it turns out that it was a whole bigger malfunction. I said, you should have been on Twitter where I'm at, 19 hours a day. You would have got the goss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twitter rewards leftists. Facebook silent, what's it called? Silent blocks them or something. I feel like
shadow bans.
Shadow bans. The more I use like leftist terms when I'm writing on Facebook, the less action I see I get. And I don't think it's because it's not popular.
It's very true.
That's true.
It's very true. Now, if you got something to say about George Soros and the vaccine, oh, buddy, that content's going to take off.
Do I have a place for you?
Facebook loves it.
Yeah, I was happy to be a Twitter addict today. Though I haven't posted a lot of things, I'm still consuming. And I was glad to see that Twitter was still around.
Twitter is just the best one out of all of them.
I agree with all of my heart.
Now, you know what I almost did today? I almost downloaded TikTok to see what that was about.
Oh, Lord have mercy. You were down bad.
Yeah, that really it's like the DTs, man.
Well,
oh, Lord.
A friend had posted a TikTok video that was just bonkers. And I was like, maybe I'll check that place out and see what happens,
My mom loves TikTok.
Yeah?
She's like, I got 40 followers. And when I'm on there, I just talk a bunch of shit about Trump. And then I get more followers.
That's a really good strategy for becoming an influencer these days.
I mean, the Keeks. She's got it. She's got it figured out.
Yep. More like Donald Rump.
Oh, how about you Another sip of that Kofifi. Oh,
Ooh,
Sick burn, bro.
he can't talk. Ooh, fish in a barrel. Anyway, I'm glad Facebook's back, I guess, so I can delete my profile.
yeah.
I legitimately can't though, because I have to post the episodes on there.
I have the same problem with my job.
Yeah. That's how Mark gets you.
Yep.
Oh, what?
All right. Let's talk about things that are very difficult and stuff.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about those things.
Let's go.
Yay.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Shannon.
And Elliot.
Hello, Elliot.
Hello.
This is
Hello.
exciting. This is, I believe, one of the first times, if not the first, that a guest host from our, sort of circulating door of guest hosts has moved from a Thursday to a Monday episode. We've had you as a guest in the past on Monday episodes or Tuesday episodes, but this is the real deal. You get to do what you want. This is your
That's right.
stage now.
Yeah, I'm like that sitcom that they want to cancel, but instead they're shopping it around.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the prime time slot, then it's got the 2 p.m. slot, and now here I am late night. No holds bar.
Conan hour. Yeah.
That's right.
8:30 p.m.
So yeah, as I guess I should continue. Dr. Flo is not here. She and her husband are at a Kings basketball game, so I don't know what that's about.
Whoa,
Taking that
okay.
over
Whatever.
us. So
Whatever.
Sacramento proud.
yeah. Whatever, Flo and Taurine.
Have fun.
Florine.
Fun letting them read your cell phone messages in the arena.
That's the most high-tech arena on earth. They are building a profile on Flo right now as we speak. I wrote a story on that in the Sacramento News and Review. Look it up, folks. Also not here today is Skylar. As you all know, he likes to go out and do Skylar things, and we just got to let him.
We gotta let them.
We got to let them run free. And if they come back, it was love.
That's right.
And if they don't,
it was.
They
just don't come back. That was poetry.
It's dark. Today, we would like to talk about something that's actually very serious here in California, I guess throughout the US too, right? They have lifted what was a very important eviction moratorium that began at the outset of COVID to protect people from getting kicked out of their homes. This started back in March of 2020, all of this. It had a number of different iterations, but this most current lifting is something that's very jarring and can really stand to harm a lot of people. And so we've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Shannon's been bringing this topic up the last few weeks, and I've been a little nervous to talk any more about it until we had someone who was really steeped in these fights, in this topic on the show again. And Elliot, obviously being a friend of the show and being someone who works so hard with the Sacramento Tenants Union, you came to mind. So thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just a small disclaimer, though I do organize with the Sac Tenants Union, I'm here in a personal capacity. I don't want to, if I slip up and say something crazy tonight, I don't want the Sac Tenants Union getting canceled.
The Sacramento Tenants Union is a group of Maoists
Yeah, that's
that
right.
is really honing the tines of their pitchforks as we speak. And
That's right.
you're missing out on those very tough hours.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
prime pitchfork sharpening time right now,
Sharpen them
people.
things right up.
Yep. Now, what was I saying? Oh yeah, let's talk about
evictions.
Evictions. Yeah. No. So let's talk about first. Elliot, talk a little bit about. Now you're saying you're speaking on your own behalf, but okay. Tell me about this thing called the Sac Tenants Union. Sort of, and on a grander scale too. What is the recent history on Sacramento renters protections, and why has this been an increasingly important topic?
Well, so just quickly, the Sacramento Tenants Union is an autonomous union of tenants here in Sacramento that are fighting for improved and increased tenant protections. And fighting in solidarity with our fellow tenants to protect against eviction, unjust, rental increases, bogus harassment and retaliation, whatever the case may be. We're self-supported, and we are constantly campaigning to build more tenant power in Sacramento to help push back against this tide of sort of landlord hegemony that we all live in. And to that point, I wouldn't say I can speak to the entire history of renters' rights in Sacramento, but maybe the recent history. I know there have been posts, actually, I've seen fairly recently on Twitter featuring tenant struggles in Sacramento going back many decades. So as much as we want to say tonight that what we're in right now is an especially acute crisis, we know this has actually been a long, drawn-out sort of crescendo of crises after crises after crises. So I'd say in the recent past, say the last 5 years, obviously housing affordability has gone through the floor. Basically, no one can afford to live anywhere at this point. At the same time, landlords and real estate developers have poured untold amounts of money into ensuring that any tenant protections that we want do not get passed. We had a big time rent control fight here in Sacramento a few years ago. Some of you will remember that, Measure C. We've also had Proposition 10. We've had Proposition 21. And all that is to say, fast forward to February of 2020, this city is experiencing an exponential crisis in tenancy. Our homeless brothers and sisters are, the population on the streets is multiplying as the rents go up. They say as rents go up, tents go up. There's a real correlation between these things. So all of this is bubbling up right before COVID hits. And then, of course, COVID just throws another huge wrench into everything.
Yeah. And I think it is important to drive that home that the most recent counts of homelessness within our county, even before COVID hit, showed untold numbers, numbers that we hadn't seen in our region before. Right. And this was a result of systemic issues. Consistently, our rent rises in the Sacramento region were the highest percentage of rent in the country. And our wages in this region just cannot match that. And when that is the case, that drives people into poverty, and it drives the people already in poverty into the streets. So that's where we were, right? Yeah, like you were saying, right when COVID was about to hit. And then it does. We all are told to stay home. Jobs dry up, incomes dry up. What happens as far as being able to maintain a space of living goes?
So for a lot of people, there was massive uncertainty. For many others, this is something I kind of wanted to bring up later, but I guess I'll bring it up now, is that, you know, this whole eviction crisis is predicated on a lot of data, and you'll see a lot of numbers thrown around. The legislative analyst's office will have one number, Bloomberg will have another number. There's a lot of nonprofits with different numbers, but always remember that an eviction on paper, an eviction that's filed in court, only represents a fraction of actual evictions. There are many more what we call self-evictions. So what's happening during COVID is landlords are ramping up the pressure. They are lighting a fire under their tenant's ass to get them out, because that tenant comes to them and says, hey, I'm sorry, I lost my job. There's nothing I can do. COVID-19 shut down the restaurant I work in, or shut down the processing plant where I make whatever it is I make, or shut down the classroom where I used to teach part-time as an adjunct. And landlords say, I don't give a damn, I want my money. And so they are pulling out every trick in the book. And so last year was the year of, I would say, underground, sort of off the books self-evictions. It was also the year of the cancel rent campaign. So with this moment of crisis came this push, this unifying push nationwide for a cancellation of rent debt. So that is to say, the rent that the tenant owes should be wiped out, and whatever the landlord is owed, that should be paid some other way. So either the tenant, or either the landlord eats it, the bank that the landlord owes eats it, or maybe the government just cuts the landlord a check, but the tenant should be left off the hook and untouched. You should not be evicted for some sort of pandemic you had nothing to do with.
Why is that important, and why is that better than some other recourse?
Well, I'll compare it to what we ended up with.
Okay.
So what we ended up with, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here.
Maybe.
After months and months and months of cancel rent, and this was, again, nationwide, from New York to Houston to Seattle to Sacramento, the call was to cancel rent. But obviously politicians and the real estate speculator backers that they have don't want to take a hit in their pocketbook, right? They want it to come out of the tenant's pocket some way, shape, or form, either in the terms of cash or in terms of penalty. We want to either be able to make you homeless or make you pay. That's really the threat that we deal with when we're talking about tenancy. The threat is always implied. We will make you pay with your life, with your safety, with your family's livelihood if you don't pay us. So what we ended up with was a patchwork of payment systems and little kicking the cans down the road. You know, it was like there was an eviction tsunami, and then it was halted at the last second, and then there was another one, and then they gave a little bit of money to everybody, and then there was another one and another one and another one. And so eventually here we are, we've reached the end of the line. The landlords and real estate speculators that back people like Gavin Newsom, that back many of the legislators who are members of the legislature themselves, they have put their foot down and they said, enough is enough. We want our money, and we want it now. And we're not giving tenants any more time to do what they need to do to make themselves safe.
So this sounds like, you know, and you've shown us some numbers on this. There were, even though there was a quote unquote moratorium, it wasn't anywhere near a full moratorium on evictions like we would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
There were still many people in California and throughout the US who were evicted through the formal process, through a sheriff's department pushing them out, and also through as you were discussing, the self-eviction process where a landlord leans on you so hard and you get so stressed and scared that you find a way to just leave the place, you know, before the sheriff's department makes you. So we've had a couple of these tsunamis so far, and it's been bad. And obviously our homelessness crisis is at least as bad as it's ever been, right? And you know, we've talked about that ad nauseum on the show, that the state is really trying to just push them around too. What's coming next now that this little patchwork even is lifted, the sieve is now lifted? What now?
So according to various, I'd say more or less reputable sources, we're looking at anywhere from 750,000 to about 1 million tenant households in California who now risk eviction because they cannot afford to pay rent. As of October 1st, all of the exceptions to paying your full rent that we had during the course of the pandemic, we had various iterations of this. There was an 80-20 deal. There was a pay 25% deal. There was a apply for assistance from the government and you get to stay deal. Most of those deals are now off the table, which means that if you were relying on that 25% rule to stay housed prior to October 1st, starting this month, your landlord can demand 100% of that money. And if they don't get it, they can take you to court and have you kicked out by the sheriff. So we're looking at, again, 750,000 to 1 million tenant households. That household could be anywhere from one to many people. So you're talking about millions, if not tens, possibly in the tens of people, many children, many of these people elderly on fixed incomes who can no longer afford the ever increasing rents that have been charged. They face a real problem in the courts. And really we have zero, at least in Sacramento, we have the Sacramento Mediation Center. We have the, in my opinion, worthless tenant protection program. It's pretty much not, I think it's named ironically. I don't think they intend to protect any tenants meaningfully. And then other than that, it's get your own lawyer or defend yourself in court against a landlord who's got an eviction mill attorney, who's filed these things 500 times before, who knows all the steps in the process and will beat you, if not argumentatively, they will beat you procedurally. They know the way these things work, and they can trick you into filing the wrong paperwork, into missing an evidentiary filing period. All these things happen, and when that happens, you are out of luck. The court is the last place you want to end up as a tenant, and self-eviction for many seems like the reasonable option, knowing how hostile the courts are to tenants.
You mentioned what, like 750,000 to 1 million households in our state are potentially, you know, could be evicted or so insecure in being able to pay their rent debt that could be next for them. And like, I obviously don't want you to name anyone, but I think during episodes like this, we tend to throw out a lot of numbers. Can we hear about just like, and Shannon, I'm sure you probably have stories too, you know, what the person going through this, who they are, what it feels like for them, what they're going through?
I'll just give a couple of examples without naming anybody, but I'd also like to hear Shannon's perspective on this, because I guess we're working two sides of the same predatory system.
Sure.
But yeah, we get contacted frequently and sometimes frantically. I'm working right now with several tenants. I'd say the main trend during COVID, because of the so-called eviction moratorium, we know that this moratorium was not a true moratorium, and that it was sort of a it was pocked full of holes like a Swiss cheese, right? One of the major holes is sale of a rental property. So your landlord cannot evict you for many other reasons during this COVID-19 period. But if your landlord comes to you and says, guess what? I want to sell the house that you live in, or I want to sell the building that you live in, they can kick you out. And they can kick you out with virtually no evidence whatsoever. It's really
they're
just
about to do that. They just say
yeah.
it. Yeah.
They just state that I intend to remove this from the market. They can file a paper with the city of Sacramento. And once they've done that, they can begin the eviction proceedings against you. And we dealt with that quite a bit. In fact, one of our STU members dealt with this as well. So I'd say there were a lot of exploited loopholes. And then there are much more personal stories of landlords who are very vindictive. They harass their tenants. They retaliate against their tenants. Their goal is to again get you to self-evict, get you to create your own homelessness crisis, so they can then point to it and say, but it was your choice. Homelessness is a choice. You didn't have to leave. I was just making it miserable for you to live there. But it's these lazy, no good tenants. They're the ones choosing this life for themselves.
What are some of the strategies these landlords are using to terrorize these folks?
Oh gosh, I mean, one of the main ones is refusal to do any sort of repairs. And those repairs are often, they stack up over time. So at first it's like, oh, the light switch doesn't work. Big deal, right? And then all of a sudden, the AC stops working. And then all of a sudden there's a leak under your sink. And then before you know it, you're living literally in a cesspool, and your landlord is looking at you like, there's one way you can fix this, and it's to give me all the money I want. And if you don't give me that, I don't know what to tell you, but the plumber ain't coming.
Right.
And eventually people just get so sick and tired of living in filth that they either leave or they go live in their car.
How about from your side, Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that last example from Elliot is a really common one. In particular, you find with families who have self-evicted, right? Because they're trying so hard to keep their spaces safe, right? Parents want what's best for their children. They want, lots of times I hear things like, I don't want my kids to have to go through what I went through. And so, I'm trying to hang on to this apartment and, but there's so many things that need to be done. And the landlord is essentially like holding hostage the repairs for their money. And it really, I think it just sort of spirals folks into this crisis space that makes it really difficult. I think the self-eviction process is this situation where I think that the pros and cons are really hard to weigh, or it's hard to do like the cost benefit analysis of pushing your landlord and like fighting for your tenant protections, or just saying like, forget this, I'm gonna go because they're never gonna do what I need them to do in order for me to live safely or comfortably or, hospitably. So then they bounce, right? So you're in that again, it speaks to the thing that I bring up so often when I talk about folks experiencing homelessness, which is the crisis equals the trauma equals the gaps in executive function because you're just trying to survive. I think the other thing that happens is, I just heard this story about a woman who was leaving her spot because she found something that worked better for her. And so she gave her notice, and the landlord was like, well, if you're going to leave anyway, just pack up your stuff and leave now. and she had no idea sort of like what she could have done to protect her housing that she had, already paid for those
Right.
that last like week and a half. And she's like, he's telling me to go, so I guess I have to go. And then all of a sudden you have this person who is experiencing homelessness as a result of just not understanding what protections are out there. And also, like the capitalist machine creates this hierarchy of power, which I think that a lot of people who find themselves in the position of like precariously housed don't often like have the stamina anymore with good reason to fight that power structure, right? It's like, I don't even know how you look at like renter protection, like pamphlets, or like try to make calls to people, and just everything can be so overwhelming, or everything is so overwhelming. And so you just don't know where to go next. It creates this hopelessness that you're never going to be able to, like, what I hear from folks all the time is like, I'm never gonna be able to like get ahead, right?
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
always fighting to make it through like the next month until I can get like my next $20 and like cobbling together rent or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's just it's crisis after crisis. Like
that brings to mind when Elliot earlier was talking about someone's got to eat it, right? And as he laid out the different people who might have to eat the debt, right, or this cost, right. It got sillier and sillier as he named the more and more powerful entities.
right.
Can you imagine if the banks in this country were ever told to eat it on anything?
Right.
Could you imagine if the landlords were told to, right? No, it was always going to be the most precariously placed lower class folks. It was always going to be the renters that would be told that they have to eat it. They have to make it work. And where are we now, right? Elliot, you sent us this write-up from Housing Now, the Bay Area Equity Atlas. And I think the numbers back in January of 2021 showed that there was $2.4 billion in estimated rent debt in households throughout the state of California, approximately $2,900 per household for a low-income family. This was, by the way, 9 months ago, right?
Right.
How bad do you think that is now? And $3,000, like for someone who is trying so hard to make every paycheck just make it last, like where the fuck do you think they're gonna end up?
Right. And they did this classic neoliberal deal making where the deal is now it's like this devil's bargain with the debt. So like the debt now exists. If you accrued rental debt between March 2020 and the end of September 2021, that debt now exists. But assuming you paid at least a portion of it, 25%, you can't be evicted for that past due debt. However, the debt now gets converted to something which is being called consumer debt, as though this makes any difference to the person who was already struggling to pay their rent beforehand. Now it's this magically converted to consumer debt, and the consumer debt has to be collected through like the civil courts. So now instead of getting evicted, your landlord can just sue you for the money and then send collectors after you for the rest of your goddamn life. And this was supposed to be the great compromise. Yeah. They're like, you're welcome, tenants. At least you won't get kicked out for it. And it's like, well, what's the damn difference if I'm trying to pay rent and the collector's taking 20% of my paycheck? There's no difference to me.
No,
the result's the same.
I'd like to thank the California Democrats for doing that. That's really just beautiful of them. They, I will mention this over and over again, have a super duper majority in the legislature here. They have about 3/4 of both houses, both the Senate and the Assembly. They have held all statewide offices for well over a decade now. There is no reason that this party that is ostensibly the party of and for the people should be doing this means testing bullshit that it's doing. That's only going to harm people further, only going to harm them further. And what it seems like is it's a bunch of landlords who are writing our legislature, which it is. I mean, a majority of our legislatures in this state are landlords. Gavin Newsom is a multi-millionaire, our governor. These people they have no idea what it's like to try and make ends meet. So we've got them writing the laws, and then also we sort of within the system have these special interest groups, the apartment association, the realtors that just fought hard against any real renters protections during a time when renters really needed their legislature and their governor to stand up, and they buckled to them, right?
Yeah.
So what happens next?
Oh,
is that too big a question?
I can say what may happen. And the reason I say it may happen is because I think the only saving grace we have at this point is that our court system is not designed to deal with the potential avalanche of paperwork they're about to get. So as sad as it is to say, our main stopgap at this point is the capacity of clerks and other administrative bureaucrats, their capacity to process the paperwork that will then initiate the eviction process for potentially millions of people across the state. I will say that during COVID, one thing that the courts found, as did many other employers, is the increased efficiency of remote work. So the courts are now taking full advantage of the remote work environment to more expeditiously process and hear all kinds of cases remotely. So you don't have to go to the courthouse anymore, which is it's like a selling point for them. We're keeping you safe by keeping you home. But that means they can schedule probably 20% more Zoom calls in a day than they could actual meetings. So it could be that the sheriff's got a full docket of lockouts. I sincerely hope that that's not the case, and I think there are ways that we can fight back against that. But barring any major shift in tenant power, in tenant solidarity, in the movement for tenant rights, barring any major shift in that, we could be at the mercy of a sheriff who we all know is would love to kick a bunch of people out, and then once you've kicked them out onto the street, he'll kick them from this camp to that camp to under this bridge to over there. This is the way they like to deal with this crisis.
That reminds me of a question I had that I wasn't sure if I'd find a chance to bring it up. You sent an article, I believe it was a Cal Matters article, that was discussing the eviction rate throughout the state as well as in different counties. And they found that there were four main factors that had the main correlates for if an eviction rate in that county would be higher or lower. And those factors, and I want to hear what you think, how Sacramento stands as far as these four factors go, were the following. One, whether tenants had additional protections from a local moratorium. Two, the discretion of the sheriff's department on carrying out evictions. Three, whether the courthouse is closed during the pandemic. And 4, whether the county had a local eviction defense network in place before COVID.
Yeah.
How did Sacramento look during that, with that in mind?
The only thing that I think, the only box I think we partially check is that our courthouse was closed for a period of time last year while they were trying to get the online courthouse stuff going. But our sheriff is totally untethered. I mean, the guy's already off the leash or whatever you want to say. He's bonkers as it is, and he could really take advantage of this moment now. Other counties did find that was a way to mitigate the eviction crisis. I believe Alameda and perhaps Solano counties, I could be misspeaking there, but a couple of their boards of supervisors basically directed the sheriff's department not to enforce evictions. And so even though they were going through the courts, the people were still securely housed because the sheriff wouldn't come and lock them out. That's not something we've done in Sacramento. We also have 0 additional protections other than our tenant protection program, which really just enforces a city statute that was passed before COVID. We didn't pass anything.
That's something that our mayor, Daryl Steinberg, and former council member Steve Hansen, and all of the neoliberals on that stage, on that dais, passed because they knew a real rent control push was coming on the ballot. And we'll get to that in a second, but it was bullshit. This is one of those topics where it's like there is no let's all go to the table. It's we fight, fuck you. And that's why obviously Michelle Parasette did the right thing in making sure that got on the ballot. Right. But yeah, keep going. Yeah, we didn't have anything strong in place for that.
No, and we've done this from the very beginning. Even when the city council did pass their half-assed tenant protection and relief act, they basically modeled it after existing state law. They didn't want to push any boundaries. They don't want to push the envelope at all. They're always behind. They're never taking a leadership position, although you'll hear them throw the word leadership around like it's fucking Halloween candy. These people love to talk about leadership, but when it really matters, they hide behind other politicians who've got at least half a spine to do something, to make some waves. I think I'm talking about maybe David Chu in the California legislature. There's supervisor, I believe, Matt Haney in San Francisco, Dean Preston. These are the types of folks who are taking a stand vocally and boldly and saying the people that matter in this city or this county or this state are the working people, the poor people, the people of color who will be impacted by this eviction crisis the most. And here in Sacramento, it's crickets.
Right. It's like Sacramento is so frustrating to me in this space because we have these conversations around, as things have progressed, there have been more and more conversations around Sacramento giving a shit about homelessness and wanting to, allocate funding and get creative and all of that. And there's just like this overwhelming absence of linking housing and homelessness. Like, we can't say, Sacramento leadership cannot say that they give a shit about homelessness and they give a shit about sheltering people if they're not going to make sure that there are real renter protections, that there's real housing policy that helps people stay in homes, that helps people who want to buy homes, that makes sure that you have landlords that aren't just shitting all over their tenants. You can't have one without the other, and I think it's a really important part of this conversation. You can't talk about shelter, permanent supportive housing, services for folks experiencing homelessness without also saying, I want to make sure that renters are protected, because those folks experiencing homelessness have to come out the other side of that and at some point rent, right? And you want them to stay in housing so that they don't continue the cycle that you're trying so hard to fight. Not you, but that they are trying so hard to fight.
Well, yeah, and there's so much, and then even like beyond that, thinking temporarily a couple years down the road, who out there is fighting for robust building of public housing? Because things like that, quality public housing, that is literally what we need. The stuff that Anthony Weiner is doing, being like, hey, let's toggle our city codes and like maybe that'll change something. Like there are some little stopgaps that are being released there, but it's not enough. It's nothing like what is needed. We need public housing in my backyard. We need a focus on extremely affordable housing, and something that doesn't prioritize profit, that doesn't prioritize our corporations that are paying a good portion, most of our state and local politicians' campaigns.
And it's like, I mean, these are conversations that, like, the conversations that the three of us are having right now, it's not a new conversation, right? Like these points have been made before. They were made a decade ago or more when I started, working in the area of housing and homelessness. And the problem is that we so quickly go off course. Or I think the other part, and maybe I'm going to get shit on for this take, but we get really excited about like these protections that are in place. Like I'm air quoting protections because they're not super great, right? We've already established that.
We're just so thankful for the crumbs. We're so beaten up over this.
So we get like, all of a sudden leadership gets so excited about these protections that they have like worked so hard to put in place, that all of a sudden gets the spotlight rather than the actual like getting radical, right? And like getting down to the root of the issue. And so then all of a sudden it's fucking 15 years later and there's, a pandemic or whatever it is, right? Like, and we're stuck in the same space that we always have been.
Yeah.
And how do people get this information? How do they understand the information? How is it like processed out to people? I froze.
We wait.
Oh,
I think we fully lost her.
I'm back.
Good. There you are. Welcome back.
Thank you.
What was the question? You said, and how? And then you got stuck.
Oh, is that when I got stuck?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that all of this information is like processed out and spread out to spread into communities in a way that makes sense, right? Because I look at all of these different like renter protection, like, fact sheets, and I'm like, wait, this is all very word heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's so true.
And I am a person that doesn't have like many barriers. I don't have any barriers when it comes to these protections. And I look at these things and I'm just like, what do you want someone in crisis to do with this? Like, this isn't actually helpful. Like, it's just a stressor. It's a stressor.
It is. And I think it's something that in our state, the organizers and like locally, it's always a challenge in big, hairy issues like this. But there is some real simple messaging that I think works. Things like housing is a human right, right?
Yeah.
There's also the element that, what Elliot and the folks at STU are doing, the Tenants Union, the work that's just like, how can I help? I will help in any way possible to make sure that these fuckers don't kick you out on the street. And then building community that way, I think that might be as powerful or more, probably a whole lot more powerful than any message we can put out there. You look at, what is it, the second largest city in Austria, Graz, and they just elected leftist officials throughout their city in a state that's pretty far right, in a nation that's pretty far right.
Mm-hmm.
And they elected a city government that's leftist because that city has such a strong, robust, rich history of fighting for tenants protections. That is the baseline of what it was, right? So I look at what you're all doing and I'm like, I kind of think I see some answers there, right? I see some ideas for just how we can start fighting back and push back. I also look at Germany and I see that ballot measure that went out, and it took hundreds of thousands of corporate-owned units, housing units, and just the state just took them and said, all right, this is public housing now. And
or at least they intend to take them in some way. They have to figure out the details, I think. But yeah, the statement itself is powerful, right? Like 56 or 58% of people in Berlin said, yeah, fuck these guys taking all of our goddamn money every month and living, in Monaco and storing all their money in the Cayman Islands. Forget them.
Yeah. And one thing that speaks out to me on both of these is that they came directly from organizing efforts and just community building over and over again, right? So when I look at Sac Red Meals and all the folks who came out under the bridge to fight Caltrans Monday morning, I think about that sort of solidarity. When I think about everything I see Stu do, right? I think one of the first times I came out of my house during COVID, I went to one of your demonstrations outside of the building where landlords were walking up and like filing their eviction papers, and you were all just like,
courthouse.
You were all, it was hilarious. You were all just like making fun of these leeches as they came through. I think these direct actions are really important to the process of community building and fighting the bastards, because Daryl Steinberg will not be convinced that the bastards shouldn't be at the table.
No,
he won't.
No,
this is a class war, fully. And I think that's how this has to be done. And be it through, electoralism as they did in Graz, Austria, or be it through ballot measures as they did in Germany, or many other ways. I only mentioned Mao once in this show, right? I give myself grace for one more. There are many ways to reach what you are trying to get to. But I think it's important to, my sweet summer child moment, not feel overwhelmed by it. And I think so many of my friends who fight the tenants' rights fights, it's really hard because, you see so many losses every day. And what does the government do? What do these neolibs do? They send you these like 20-page documents that are like, here's what you can do to apply for assistance. And they're like, it's just bureaucracy. And it's like, well, do you really need this? How bad do you need this? And they end up giving away 10%, if that, of what the real need is. And people still, at almost the same pace, are going to end up out in the street. So we need something drastic, and we need something different that will really ensure that people are being protected.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I just wanted to hammer on something that Shannon said earlier that I think is really, really important, is that you cannot deny the links between the tenants' rights crisis and the so-called homelessness crisis. These things are directly tied. It's not even like a correlation. These are it's literally two stops on one track. And to hear politicians use this sort of double speak where they say we care so very deeply about our homelessness or our homeless populations, we want to throw all these resources at fixing this problem, as they call it, or clean up this problem, as they say, and then at the same time say to tenants, no, we will not help you stay housed. And it's enough to drive you up the wall. But to your point, Dave, there is an alternative here. And as you said in Berlin, as you said in Graz, or if whether it's Red Vienna, or whether it's the Union of Tenants in England, or the Nationwide Tenants Union in Sweden, these are institutions that were built up over years, if not decades, of deep and dedicated organizing in working class communities over the right to housing, because without that you can't go to work. So your labor unionism and your tenant unionism have to work together. And I feel that we're at a pivotal moment now in terms of tenant union activism. Last year I felt almost bullish, which is strange to feel that way in such a shitty ass year. But it was like the crisis and the contradictions were heightening all the time. And I thought at any moment now, there will be we'll go over some sort of precipice and we'll be in some new consciousness. But of course, politicians are very clever, and they've reeled us out of just enough line over the year,
Just enough. Yeah.
They just give us the crumb, and then they give us the little fish, and then the medium fish, and then they say, yeah, we'll give you some free money. And then before you know it, people are so confused, as you said, Shannon, they're so upside down with the 15 different state laws and the county thing and the city thing. They don't know which way is up. And then you come to them and you say, hey, we've got a plan. All you got to do is talk to your neighbors. And they go, the hell I do. What are you talking about? I've already been, everyone's telling me they're here to help, and no one's helped. So
Right.
Organizing right now in this moment is difficult, but it is highly, highly necessary.
Here's a question. Go, Shannon.
No, I was maybe gonna do like a call to action. Is that what you were gonna do?
That was my question. Yeah. How does one organize, Elliot? How does one take a next step in this fight?
So personally, like on the individual level, you want to educate yourself. There are a couple of things that you should absolutely know. One is that there is still money available through the state rental assistance program here in Sacramento. It's through the SHRA, Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. But if you go to housing.ca.gov, it'll get you to your local housing authority. And there, if you owe rent to your landlord and you're afraid your landlord is going to evict you because you owe this money, apply for the damn money. And if you do end up getting sent to court over an eviction, even the fact that you've applied for the money can be a defense in court against the eviction. Judges have been directed not to evict people who are in the process of applying for this rental assistance.
Elliot, let's say I want to apply for this, but I get to the webpage and I don't know the internet and I don't know questionnaires, and I'm frustrated and scared. Who do I call?
So SHRA does actually have a helpline, but the Sacramento Tenants Union has helped people through this process as well. So you can contact us for a little bit of an assist. I know we've worked with people who didn't have a computer but desperately needed this money to protect themselves. So get in touch. Do not allow these barriers to keep you from getting what is ostensibly the closest we're ever going to get to actual rent cancellation in California. They're going to write you a check that you give to your landlord, and that'll clear your debt forever. Now, going forward from October 1st to November 1st, all your rent is due now. And then starting November 1st, your landlord can begin suing you for your back due rent, which has been converted to civil debt. All this is sort of very wonky and probably not that helpful to your listeners. So what I'd like your listeners to do is talk to your neighbors. Your neighbors are experiencing the same things you're going through. They've lost their jobs. They've gotten the threatening letters from their landlords. They are under the same pressures of capitalism that you exist under. And do not let that pressure isolate you and atomize you. Talk to people and then reach out to the Sacramento Tenants Union, because we want to help you organize and we want to grow this movement into something powerful and something that politicians and their landlord backers really have to reckon with, rather than just deal with occasionally. We want them to have to think twice before they ever try to force millions of people into homelessness ever again.
I want to drive that home to people. For them to reach out to you and also to talk to their neighbors. These are the first steps of organizing, but organizing is a skill set. You have to build it, and it's a skill set I personally don't have, right? So it's okay if you're a listener and you're like, I'm not an organizer, I don't know how. It's as simple as just talking to folks and then reaching out to Stu, and then reaching out to, actually, Labor has great coaches on some of the ins and outs of organizing. Folks like that, there are ways that we can all empower ourselves and our neighbors to be great organizers and really take down these bastards. On top of that, ACE, I wanted to mention them as well. I worked with ACE on the rent control, both state and local campaigns, and they're fantastic organizers. And so shout out to them. I'm sorry I didn't even mention you all during this episode.
Yeah, ACE does a lot of work in the Capitol, pushing some really crucial bills. We've had bills this session about tenant harassment, right to counsel, and other housing related things that could go a long way towards giving tenants just that extra step up. Shannon, you were talking earlier about this constant crisis people are in, and if you can get that, I don't know what you want to call it, that buoy, that flotation device on, and you can level yourself for just a moment, then additional organizing could be possible. Mm-hmm. But one doesn't come without the other. You can't win rights without organizing for them, but you can't really organize effectively without some minimal rights. So these two fights go hand in hand.
I think, when we started this episode, I was like many episodes on this program called Voices River City, I start and I think, this is going to be a rough one. And then we get to the call to action, and I do start to feel like little fireworks go off. Not as many as I think Kempa does.
Elliot gets me really fired up on this topic, and I always, and when I'm reading the articles, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy stuff. I mean, and that's what we do.
You need people doing you need people to light that fire under you, right? I mean, that's part of the skill set, I guess, of organizing.
So I guess my question is, if I wanted to know about sort of the big, the important topics, news of the day, current events that are, just extremely leftist and extremely perfect, and maybe it's a little bit of a downer, but at the end I'm always going to feel a little bit more excited to just get my ass out into the community and get shit done. Where can I go for that, Kempa? I think you're the one.
I think I've got an answer for that. I have two answers, and they are two little things I like to call Comstock's magazine and the Sacramento Business Journal, that are really the people's outlets. let's talk about Voices River City for a second. You know,
geez.
it's a leftist organization that's been around since 2017. We started out with news and arts coverage and community voice essays, speaking truth to power. And, you know, we covered all sorts of things. Black Lives Matter, Stefan Clark, renters' rights fights. We were one of the first to carry an essay from now council member Valenzuela about, you know, what was wrong with Steve Hansen's. Well, I guess she didn't write about that, but we all knew. She just wrote about her vision. We have done all sorts of essays on all sorts of things, sort of fighting back against the Darrell Steinbergs, the neoliberal consensus in this city that we, I think, are trying to help people see that it does not have to be a consensus anymore, and that we can think more deeply and through a class lens on this kind of thing. The current iteration of Voices River City obviously is the podcast. That's been, the resurrection has been almost exactly just now about 5 days over 2 years old. So happy birthday to us.
Wow.
And yeah, you know, we're just really happy with what that's grown to be. And we just want to keep fighting these fights with everyone who's out there. Especially the folks who put their bodies on the line for other folks. It's I think that's the real important work, and those are just the most incredible people. So anyway, you can find us at voicesrivercity.com. We are on the socials when they are up and running: Facebook Voices River City, Instagram at Voices River City, Twitter at Voices River City. We're on Patreon if you'd like to get our Friday episodes as little as $5 a month. If you really feel like it, if you wanna really help the movement, the Voices movement, you could do $25 a month, and you get a t-shirt and a mug out of that. So that's fun. And Shannon's like, I got some t-shirts and mugs to send.
I really should. I look
You
at
do, I know.
those post-its every day.
We got to go back and check that. Sorry to the listeners who we owe. I think there's 2 or 3. And then, yeah, you know, we want to be all free, but in this current iteration, that's kind of where we are right now. But I think someday we'll be getting back to that. But this is just the classic Chapo socialist business model, right? But yeah, so that's Voices, I guess. I am on the socials. I'm on Twitter at Kempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
I was like, you're not done yet. I am at Shan N.D. Stevens.
And I'm gonna plug. Oh, sorry, Shannon.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna plug the SAC Tenants Union. We're on Twitter at SAC Tenants Union, or you can find us now on our new and improved website, sactenantsunion.org. You can actually become a member there. You can lodge some, you can tell us about the problems you're having with your landlord. If you're in the media and you've got a question for us, you can contact us through there. So we try to streamline our process, make the union more approachable, and we'll be making many more improvements in the coming months. But we welcome you to join us at a meeting or an action in the future.
Okay, Elliot, you keep your secrets. I like this. This is one of the funniest people on Twitter, and nobody will know who it is.
True.
Yeah.
Every tweet is hilarious.
Yes.
Skylar is guillotine for you. Guillotine, the number 5, YOU. And Flojan Kofer, Dr. Flo, is at Flojan, FLOJAUNE. I guess that's it.
That's the show.